Chasers out in Kansas for the last hour.
Mhm.
We're live.
We are live. Oh,
Go
well,
ahead.
hello, folks.
Hello.
Good evening and welcome to Jungle Chasers. We do have an interesting topic for you this evening. We are going to talk about a question that keeps coming up to many of us about, apocalyptic times, and people start getting interested in amateur radio. Ultimately, we will get to that topic and we will discuss what it takes and things to do to make sure that you're ready. And those radios do work for what you intend them to do. I was just going to show some interesting storms, but we can kick off with whatever you guys like.
I would say kick off with the storms.
Okay.
Go ahead and show them.
So I'm getting to my folder here. I will share it in a moment. Okay. I think I will share it in a moment.
While she's doing
Okay.
that, just making sure you can hear me okay?
Yep, sounds good.
Awesome. I hadn't quite switched the audio over yet.
So what I was watching was started here. I noticed 3 cells in Kansas that were moving toward each other. And the series of photos that occur, these do merge. It was like osmosis in reverse. Here's where it becomes like one great big massive cell. And it sat in one place, whoops, where I should name them A, B, C, D and not not 1, 2, 3, because this oh, this is the video that I took. It won't show as a video in this. Daggone it, I should have done A, B, C, D. Here we go. So, the hail cores took a while to congeal together. If you notice up here, it's starting to push forward, but it doesn't move. It sits in this same spot while it gets itself together, goes tornado warned. I would say there's a tornado there.
Mm-hmm.
And then it is a huge supercell. It had some massive hail in it. You can see here 2.5 or 2.75. There was a tornado reported. And this is what happened while it was sitting there. It became this great big line before it started moving. This still maintained its supercellular characteristics until in Charlie here. Still possibly tornadic. The northern end of it also became warned for 70 to 75 mile an hour winds up in this northern region here. But this process only took about an hour. Oh, I think we're on to something else now. Anyway, it's still looking quite a bit like this, although these 2 cells that were to the southeast of it are starting to merge into it now.
Mm-hmm.
It's been quite an interesting process. Anyway, that's what I had to share.
Yeah, and I'm looking at that on my radar right now, and it still shows very, very impressive hail cores just there south east of Lakin and due south of Deerfield, Kansas. Also, kind of in between, I think that's Johnson City and Ulysses, Kansas. There's quite a wide hail core there, and then kind of between Moscow and Copeland. And you had mentioned tornado. There had been two different spotter network postings. One kind of just south of Deerfield, where that big hell quarry is, 11 miles southeast of Lakin, Kansas, is actually what they put in for the location. Brief tornado touched down at my location, just lifted. That was at 8:23 p.m. And then a little bit earlier than that, near Moscow, I think this was it. Yeah, right here at 8:05. If I can get this pulled up. Yeah, 9 miles northwest of Moscow, Kansas. Tornado 4 minutes ago, 9 miles northwest of Moscow. Lifted now with still slight circulation. So there's definitely some oomph in these areas. And before it was kind of like one big kind of line that kind of came from Deerfield to Lincoln, kind of down to Johnson City and curved back with a couple little discrete cells around between Moscow and Copeland. Those have kind of pretty much merged together. There's one bigger one closer to Moscow and a smaller one that I think is kind of getting merged into that one closer to Copeland. But if you look back towards Ulysses, that big, huge line is starting to, it kind of looks like merge with that that bigger of those two kind of southwest of there.
Well, and the two are merging into one, and then merging into the big
into
storm.
That big blob. Yeah.
Yeah. So has
interesting night for Kansas.
Yes. There's some storms down in Texas too. I hadn't checked into that. They're still south. They just popped a tornado warning. And tornado observed. That's the one that you were talking about.
Yeah, that one that was east of
southeast of Lakin. Yeah.
Yeah, that's that same general area. And they have got some spotters out east of that general area.
There've been quite a number of chasers in that area too. So.
Yeah. Interesting.
Anyway, yep. So that was my share for the night.
Well, we've got a few things going on. Not in the least of which we've got some weather coming up. In the next few days here.
Probably in the morning. I just did my own kind of nightly run through, and it looks like we may have 3 waves, but they said 2 last week, and it wound up being 1.
The
big
later
one
kind of fizzled out.
Yeah. Well, the atmosphere stabilized.
Yeah.
So, this is probably the system that we're looking at coming in tomorrow. With it being over by Dodge City, it takes about 9-10 hours to get here, or longer depending on forward speed. This has not been moving very fast, so it could even be later in the day. But general movement is east.
Gotcha.
So there were some cells. And I hadn't even looked at our weather. I looked out the window a while ago and went, oh, it's been raining.
Yeah, we were at Neighborhood Market, and we went down an aisle, and I all of a sudden heard a loud noise. It sounded like something up on the roof, and I was like, I wonder if it started raining, because it's looked like it could off and on all day. And then we check out, and we get to the front door, and it's not just pouring, but it's a good steady rain.
Persuade this. There we go. Yeah, we've just got some gentle showers in the area.
right now.
And they had been kind of interesting out to the west, but they're doing what they were projected to do, and they're kind of fizzling as they come through.
Closer to us. Yeah, the most intensive part that I see is kind of between Berryville and Harrison, and then kind of around Mountain Home, and that just looks like pockets of heavy rain.
Right, right. And I think it all is.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're casting some long shadows on those individual cells, though.
Mhm.
With the sun going down, it's kind of cool on the radar. There you go. Look at those shadows.
Oh yeah.
Huh.
Now see, I don't think I quite see like that on mine, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, this is level 2, so it does pick up on some stuff. I don't know how much it. I haven't done enough research on this program to know if it pulls in some satellite with it,
Mm-hmm.
or if that's just projected by the computer model.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
It could be
I
a possibility.
believe it has some. It's more of just a visual effect because you can turn that on and off. I believe that's added. It's not
Ah,
part of the radar.
Well, I was going
okay.
to say because this program, WSV3, it includes satellite data, doesn't it?
Oh yeah,
Yeah. So that may be kind of a little bit of a combination of radar and satellite. See,
Incorporated in.
that's one of the few things that it's not makes me dislike radar scope, but it's one of those features I wish it had added, that it had satellite data as well as the fronts. I really wish it had those two big features, but it doesn't.
Well, if you wanted to pay for an add-on like Allison House, you'd get the fronts. Now, the one disappointment I had with that was they don't the fronts on Radar Scope didn't move in real time, but
Mhm.
they did give you a pretty good idea of where they were at. None of the programs I have used since GR Level 3 and WSC3 and Radar Scope alike, none of them have the arrows on the fronts. But
Gotcha.
we get a pretty good idea here anyway, just based on where the storms are coming in. So
Yeah, and sometimes I just would like to just kind of be able to see about where it's at. And I mean, I have occasionally whenever I've really, really kind of been gripey, and I'm like, I just want to know where the front is. I've either went over to KY3's radar, or I went to the Weather Underground and thrown up the fronts and seen, oh, okay, that's about where they're at, and kind of get it side by side with radar scope, and I can, oh, okay, yeah, that's probably about where the
you
front
can
is.
you can get an idea here, over by Denver up to Garden City and then down toward Monroe, Louisiana and around. That I'm assuming this part's pushing east, but I don't know what this is doing, if it's pushing north or south.
Gotcha.
Um, that's the one feature I would like to see them add.
Hmm.
But and I think they do have it in the production version that some of the TV meteorologists use.
Gotcha.
I don't have that kind of money.
I understand that.
Okay.
So, I guess the next thing that we have on the docket for tonight, we have from the National Hurricane Center sort of the get ready, guys. It's going to be a really bad season this year.
Yeah, I've heard it could be more active than usual.
Right. So, I think pretty much all of us have, with the exception of Franklin, a pretty good HF capability.
Yeah.
And
I can monitor, I just can't transmit.
sure.
But you can. And if you're interested, they can always use a good net control on Echolink.
True. See, my issue has been, and maybe I can get it going here. When we were still down at the house, I was only really able to get Echolink going on the laptop on Linux, and one time I'd sign in and it worked flawlessly, and the next time it wouldn't. But it's probably about time for me to try to see if I can get it going again. At one time I had it going on a previous iPhone and iPad, no problem at all. I've never been able to get it to work on the Mac, even using the Mac program that is supposed to make it work, and spending almost a week off and on with a guy in the Echolink Facebook page that he told me every single thing he did to get it going on his Mac, and we still couldn't get it going on my iMac.
Oh my. Well, you've got Linux, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you should be able to get it going in the Linux.
Yeah, and like I said,
side.
and what the issue was, it wasn't that I couldn't get on at all with the Linux laptop. One time everything would be perfectly crystal clear, and then the next time it'd be real staticky. But like I said, different location, maybe a little bit, maybe more consistent, stable connection, I might be able to get it to work better. And also, even Echolink, if I didn't want to mess around with that, or I couldn't get that working, if I really wanted to, I could connect into a remote station, and I could operate through the internet that way. But that might not be quite part of the subject for tonight. Maybe that's something to look into for another episode.
That would be something to definitely look into. What does it take to do Echolink? And it's different. You can use it on a handy talkie. You can use it on your laptop, on your phone, on multiple devices.
You can access it through a repeater.
That's true.
Right. And our R91 is set up to be able to be used with the National Hurricane Echolink system. It was kind of built as a backup when Jim was doing net control, so he could do it from his house if he had to. Now the interesting part is not this Saturday, but next it will be the National Hurricane Center annual station test. And that's WX4 NHC will be on the air, and they're marking 40 years of public service at the National Hurricane Center. They're going to be on HF, VHF, UHF, APRS, and WinLink. And let's see. The VoIP Hurricane Net, and they'll be active on there from 20 to 21 UTC on that on the 30th.
Okay.
And so not sure how long. I don't really see here the length of time they're going to be going on HF, but they're testing facilities, so signal reports. It'll be like a net just to make sure everything's working okay.
Yeah, make sure their equipment's working, their net controls equipments are working. People who typically send in reports during hurricane season, just to make sure everything's working okay and everything.
Yeah. So, but they're also concerned that we're going to see a more active hurricane season this year. And I mean, we've already. I'm not going to say that what happened out in the Atlantic was a hurricane or anything close to it, but it was like our tornado watches. We had all the ingredients necessary. It just never developed into a hurricane.
we had the batter going. We just never popped it in the oven and got cupcakes.
Right.
That's right.
It ended up given Bermuda a little bit of a scare, and I don't believe anything's going on now, but it's one of those things. I kind of enjoy that because you can get in there and you can play a part in a kind of a national net, and especially if you've got some net control training, you can do it on Echolink for sure. But you know, a lot of times they're looking for reports from the affected areas. Well, those affected areas might be Cuba. It might be Texas. You know, it's just no telling where it could be. So.
And you know, people might be thinking, well, okay, if they have a hurricane in Florida or Cuba or even say like the east coast of Georgia or South Carolina, how can I help if I live in Kansas or New York State?
Let me explain.
Well, okay, go ahead.
I can jump on
I
that.
Go into that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, go ahead. Go ahead with yours.
I was just going to say a lot of times, sometimes they may have net controls that do not even live in the affected area. They can get, as long as they can hear traffic coming from the affected area and they're able to communicate with whoever they need to relay that traffic to, doesn't matter whether you live in the area or not. In fact, a lot of times, you know, maybe people who do live in the area that normally might provide communications, maybe their antennas got taken down, maybe their commercial power is out, and whatever their secondary power, whether it be battery or solar panels or whatever, that's no longer operational. So a lot of times you'll actually have net controls or people who relay from out of the area either to where the traffic needs to go to another area, or even sometimes back into the same area, just because of the way that things skip over and the signal goes this way and that way. You can probably much better and more eloquently put that together into a thought, Patty, than I just did, but that's kind of
Hey, I followed you right along. So I've listened to a number of hurricane nets on Echolink and HF alike. In both cases, you're right. The net control doesn't necessarily live in the affected area. I'll give a specific example. When Hurricane Ike was coming in, took a path through Texas, and actually we were still experiencing hurricane force winds here in the Ozarks when it came through. But when it was hitting the Gulf, the net control was, I think, in Temple, Texas. Might have been Tyler. I know it was a T. She was a part of their Aries network down there. The power went out in Fort Worth as a result of storms that were going through, and so they weren't able to get their warnings out. Lake Charles, Louisiana actually picked up and was putting the warnings out for them, and so we could hear all that here and see those things here. Well, because the warnings weren't coming out of Fort Worth, I offered to read the warnings for them from here for the Fort Worth area. So you know, that's how that can happen. HF makes that happen. Echolink makes that happen.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember. Been a number of hurricanes I listened to the nets, and Jim was so eloquent on there. I know they miss him dearly.
I'm sure.
We do too.
Yes.
But they, you know, there could be a net control here that was actually reading for Florida or reading for North Carolina or reading for Georgia. We just have that capability. You know, it's not cell phone, folks. If the power's out, it's amateur radio. And getting reports out, there are repeater systems all over the country, but they're with Echolink nodes on them, with all Starlink nodes on them. And we can communicate in that way as well. A good preparedness plan isn't just having a radio out of a box and setting it up and hooking it to an antenna. You practice, and these guys practice. That's what this upcoming thing is about with with the Hurricane Center. They want to make sure their equipment is up to the task because they're going to be putting things out as well. So
Yeah, that way, if someone needs to tune an antenna, needs to replace an element, maybe needs to change connectors on coax cable, or maybe swap out coax cable, they know ahead of time so that they have time to do that and get ready before, they're trying to run a net or pass traffic, and, no one can hear them or they can't hear anyone, and, possibly something that would be time sensitive, critical information, so it doesn't get dropped and no one gets it in time. They can kind of make sure they got everything up to par ahead of time.
exactly.
Which is
Exactly.
kind of a little bit of what we do with field day, really.
And I mean, here's the thing too. When it comes to HF, you know, uh, especially when we've got like little contests, and it's a really good example when we had the QSO party. People were calling from our state, but we couldn't hear a word they were saying. That we because it literally, as far as atmospheric and just the way radio waves bounce off the ionosphere, it was impossible for them to hear. So because we have a network that works as the Hurricane Watch Net with the HF, if they are transmitting in an affected area, the net controls that are in the affected area won't hear that. And so that's why the network of, you know, third-party communication and everything flies in that. We hear it because it's bouncing off the ionosphere, it's coming straight to us,
Right.
and we can automatically relay that back to the people who can actually listen.
And the net controls will ask for relays. Do I have any relays? Because other people can hear, like you said, people can hear them, but they can't necessarily hear what's on top of them. Or it's magic. It's magic. Can I back us up a little?
Yes. Go ahead.
So there's probably a number of folks on here. We're talking HF, we're talking QSO. They don't know what we mean.
Right.
You know?
I was going to say we're segueing our way right into the topic of discussion for the evening. Couldn't be a more perfect setup.
It's easy to do because it's second nature to all of us. Steve's been in the hobby since 1983. Wave your hand, Steve. We didn't introduce ourselves tonight. I've been in the hobby since 2008. My name is Patty. Franklin, what, 2010, 2011?
No, 2012.
2012. Rodney?
I started in HF in 2015.
When did you actually get your license?
Mm-hmm.
It was in March of 2015.
Okay. Yeah, and we all progressed up pretty well, pretty quickly. I took my tech test and got my general the same day. So
I didn't quite do that, but I got my tech in April of 2012, and then I got my general in August of that year.
I got my tech in March, and then I studied up and got my general in May of that same year. But I didn't really do anything as far as HF until, 2016, 2017.
Yeah.
So I sat with a general license with not much, to speak of as far as, my ability to talk HF and whatnot. So.
Yeah, I was kind of the same way too, largely because I really didn't have an antenna, and I had Kenwood TS-820, which is a marvelous radio. It's an older radio. It's probably about 35, 40 years old by now. It's what they call a hybrid, so for people that don't know what that is, the transmit section of it still uses vacuum tubes, but the receive section of it is all solid state. So you can listen without having to tune it up and everything, but the transmit, you still got to tune it up. So I was really intimidated about that. So I never did do that. And it turns out maybe that was a good thing, because when we actually went to try to transmit on it, no power was coming out. So it's currently sitting on a bench being fixed gradually as time goes by. But really, until I got that 746 Pro, which I have now, I really didn't transmit much except for a couple times at Route 66 on the air. So I guess I'm probably still a little bit of an HF novice, although I'm familiar with some of the kind of the gentleman rules and regulations and stuff like that. I can do it. I just, particularly now that I'm in an apartment and I really can't put up a big, huge antenna, that kind of limits a little bit of what I can do on HF.
I need
But
to introduce you to the omnidirectional desktops
yeah,
antennas. Anyway, so I'm going to back us up just a little bit. So when a person gets their license for amateur radio, there's different band plans for different licenses. The introductory license for amateur radio is a technician. There are some limited privileges there on the higher frequencies, but it's limited, and it's there for the purpose of for that person learning about those frequencies and having the ability independently of going to someone else's house or going to a field day event or something like that, so that they can learn and play with it. The general, which I think most people wind up getting if they don't stop at tech and use it for local purposes, is the common. I say common. I think the majority of hams have the general. Gives a lot more high frequency capability. So if you're going into if you're considering amateur radio not only as a hobby but as an emergency communication, there's several things to think about. One, who are you going to talk to? Who do you need to talk to? Who do you want to talk to? That's going to dictate what you do, what license you get. If it's local people that you need to reach out to, or if you're in an area like we are that is kind of a tornado alley, and what happens if my house goes down around me? Well, if you've got a handy talkie and you've tested it out and you can hit the repeaters, you can call for help even if you don't have cell phone capability.
mm-hmm.
If you've got a child, you're living here in the Ozarks and you've got a child down on the Georgia coast, and a hurricane's coming in and your child doesn't have cell phone capability for whatever reason, 130 mile an hour winds do a number on cell towers, as do tornadoes that are generated by hurricanes. Is your child licensed too? Just you having a radio is not going to get you into communication with your child. And then what frequency are you going to use? Do you have a plan with this child?
And have you tested it?
And have you tested it? Getting a radio, and like Franklin said, you get it, you don't use it, you set it on the bench. It may not work 10 years from now when you need it.
Yeah, or you may need to use a function or change a function or a setting. If you're not familiar with it, you don't know how to do that, and it may be something that, okay, I can go grab the manual if I know where the manual's at, and I can flip through it and find it, and okay, that's how I change the setting. But what if it really is an emergency and you don't have 10-15 minutes to go find the manual and find where that setting is in the manual? You kind of need to be familiar enough with the radio that, if you need to change a setting or something or turn on a function, you can just go do it and not have to figure out, well, how was it that I did that last time?
And are you going to use a digital mode using your computer? Do you have backup power? If your power's out, do you have backup power that you could, and your main mode is digital communications to reach out to this child, because it seems to be a little more dependable sometimes, depending on band openings. And do you have a backup plan if your particular band is down? There's a lot to be considered. And Steve had a good point, and here's the band plan Rodney's sharing with us.
Awesome.
Give you an idea of what license can broadcast on and where. Some of this is digital mode, some of this is Morse code. and some of this is voice. The majority of it's voice. Um, what happens if you get on a frequency that you're not supposed to be on can be big trouble.
Yeah.
60 meters and 30 meters are used by military and federal government. And we have some limited privileges on both.
Yes, for interoperability purposes, and I think some of those are secondary privileges, aren't they?
60 is, and it's channelized.
Yeah.
The Coast Guard has some frequencies in there, but as far as like 30 meters, it's I'm not aware of any voice communication in that. It's all digital.
I think 30's all digital, isn't it?
Well, for ours,
data,
for as far as ham operators, we do code on there too quite often.
Yeah.
But it's that there's nothing really close to it that is, something you can get to now. Interestingly enough, the most important part is going to wind up being what's near you, and VHF and UHF is going to be pretty good as far as being close to you. Now, I did a presentation in the club about the importance of being in a club and why do we do it, and this is part of that, why we do it, and why do we have a Friday night net. Why is there a Tuesday night training net? And then we ran into our potential hazardous disaster situation with could have probably been a far lot worse pandemic than what it was, but yet we encouraged people to check in regularly on a net, not just because they're our friends. Because there were some of them that weren't friends until we started the nets, but we know their voice. Brand new ham, I'll make an example of him. Waylon, ZZV, spoke to him 4 or 5 times on the net. He choked back the fear and keyed the mic and got on my net first. Talked to me first. That was kind of cool. I was his first contact on amateur radio. And I won't say that he's now an old pro, but he sounds a lot more comfortable on the radio. And if I heard a portion of his voice now, I would know who he was.
And see, that's a lot of it sometimes, not necessarily that I hear that call sign or I hear that name, I know who that is. A lot of times it's just, I hear that voice and there may have been some static or something and I didn't catch the call sign, but I know that's Steve, so his call sign is KA0SPM. I know he's reliable. I know he's not going to over-exaggerate a situation, so right. I'm going to take his weather report serious.
Right. So, and it's important, the Aries groups in the county, here in Greene County, as well as surrounding counties, they have their practice nets every week, and it's for the same purpose. They get to know each other. It's not just a check-in net. Have you got any news for the net? Have you got something you want to share? I like the Ragtra approach for getting to know people a little bit better, but they all still have a purpose. You're testing your equipment weekly. You're hearing the voices that might be there in case of a disaster, in case of severe weather, and familiarizing yourself with them. Again, you get that radio, you sit it on a bench. What are you going to do when you really need it? You don't have the practice, and you don't know the lingo. It takes a little bit. This QSO or QSO that we were talking about just means a chat. It means that we've gotten on the radio and we're talking to somebody. We know that. We've been in the hobby a while. QST, our location, is another one. QSY, we're going to go to another frequency. You don't automatically know that. And the things that you do need to know to operate, you're not going to have one manual sitting in front of you, unless you get the big ARRL book, uh,
Yeah.
so that you can function. It takes practice, and as you get into it, it is a great hobby. So much more than just getting on and talking, chasing satellites and trying to talk to people around the world on a satellite. That's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Um, so, uh, get involved with a club.
And,
If you're really serious about getting getting a radio for emergencies, that's wonderful. But get involved in a club. You've got Elmers in there. They can tell you what antenna to put up for the purposes that you want to use it for.
yeah.
They maybe even help you set it up. It's not one antenna for all those frequencies on that band plan.
And see,
You
that's something that I didn't realize until after I got to looking into it, because I was coming from a background in CB radio and business band radio, where you have one antenna for everything that you want to work, but that's because all the frequencies that those radios cover are in the same band. Whereas with amateur radio, you've got so many other bands, and literally, in theory, particularly if you want the best signal on everything, you'd have a separate antenna for each band. A couple of them that are really big, like 80 meters, you could probably divide that up into two, or if you wanted to get real picky, maybe even three separate antennas to cover three separate portions of that band. So that's something that I didn't realize when I started going into looking at, okay, what antenna do I want to buy? Well, okay, this just covers like 2 or 3 bands, or this one may cover 4 or 5, 6, but it's like $800 or more. And
right.
then I started realizing why they're that high, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff going into to make it work on 5 or 6 or 7 different bands.
Well,
And then
thing
what
about
happened?
Antennas, and Steve has taught me this fundamental rule that most any antenna that's available now, unless you've got mountainous acreage, it's a compromised antenna, no matter what. So it's not going to be working at its fullest potential. You might be able to get an antenna that's tuned for this, or it's resonant for this, and that's great. But when you start getting into like 80 meters and 160 meters, I mean, that's a very long length, and you have to work with those types of frequencies. It's always going to be something that's compromised.
Yeah, that's true. One of the things that I guess it kind of always bugged me about the ARRL handbook was, they told you what the ideal antenna should be. And it, like a dipole needs to be a half wavelength off the ground. Well, you know how far a half wavelength is on 80 meters?
No, I know.
It's 130 feet.
Well, it would be 40 meters, and then convert 40 meters to feet, and yeah, it's quite a way.
Or if you're really wanting to do 160 meters, that's 260 feet above the ground. Most of us do not have the abilities to get an antenna in that kind of height. And so there's where the compromise is. Now, do they work good? Sure. Yeah, they work good. I built a vertical. 40 meters is easily come by with reasonable components. In fact, the one that we had for Winter Field Day was portable. I frequently hear South Africa with that, and not that I was aiming for that. It was just that, hey, this works good. But the thing is, though, back to the topic of what we're talking about, you don't know that until you experiment with it.
Right.
I can sit in front of the club, and I've done it, and showed them an antenna made out of phone wire and pop bottle caps. And it worked. It worked good. I didn't use any more than that. I was down in the Hercules Glade talking to Estes Park in Colorado with 10 watts. And according to the book, I should not have been able to do that. I should not have been able to put it in. It wasn't 10 feet in the air. I mean, I just threw as high as I could over a tree with a rock and a rope and pulled it up. And as soon as I did that, I got hit with a solar storm, and it just killed everything. I was like, whoa, that's perfect. And it slowly worked its way back in, and in the meantime, I tried to lure deer in with Twizzlers, and they weren't having any of it. But you know, that comes from experience. That comes from being out there doing it, and you don't get any of it if you just say, well, I got enough learning to get my license, and then just stop. Just let it go.
I'm just gonna buy a radio. I'm gonna put it in a backpack, throw an antenna and some batteries and wire and stuff, and it'll just take care of itself when I need it. That's not gonna work.
And we don't go 10.7, and we don't go 10.10, and we don't go 10.100 and be on the side.
You know, that CB radio slang page was it just messed us up bad.
I'm just wondering, you know, would it be worse to have to go 10.100 or 10.200?
Depends on where you are and what facilities are available,
so.
and what gender you are.
Yeah.
So,
if that gives you guys a different, you know, an idea what the difference between 10.100 and 10.200 is.
They can guess.
Go to the CB slang wiki page, man. That's
or watch the first.
Man, that brought back old memories. So learning, you know, I think more people are familiar with CB, and the ones that I'm seeing come into the hobby either have a military background. I mean, recent times, military background, no radio experience at all, or they come from CB. And you're going to find out that there are a couple of frequencies that they still get a bit vulgar on in ham radio, but for the most part, there's a gentleman's agreement, gentlewoman's agreement, however you want to say it, that we don't curse and we don't do business. Well, that's law. We don't do business on our radios.
And actually, the cursing is too. You can have your license pulled by the FCC if they catch you doing that.
Of course, that one's kind of, being a trustee, I have a unique situation because our culture has changed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The words that we commonly use now that used to be considered vulgar and extreme are now part of the common language. And so I've had people come up to me, oh man, did you hear what so-and-so said on the 9-1? And I'm like, well, yeah. Well, aren't you going to do anything about that? Well, no, because if you're allowed to say it on network TV, I pretty much couldn't tell you can't say it on network radio.
The way with me, I've always taken that is what's the intention behind it and what's the reason that they're using that language. That's just kind of the way I've always took it.
I'd be quicker to ban someone who is picking on someone else, bullying someone else. I would be quicker to boot them from the repeater than if they just used a word that I thought might have been a little bit vulgar. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And because there's folks that just that's the way they talk. That's just the way it is. You know.
Yeah. And I mean, even if it's one time, it's not a regular habit. Maybe it might have been heat of the moment, slip of the tongue. I can forgive someone like that. Now, there's been a few repeaters that I've listened to through the internet, mostly kind of in the Southern California area. If anyone that I've mentioned it before knows which one I'm talking about.
Animal House repeater.
It's like every other word every time you listen to it, and I honestly cannot understand how some of those guys do not get their license pulled.
What is it, 7280 late at night? Somewhere in that area?
No, that's it was 3840 on 80. that was kind of.
I knew there was a couple portions of 80 I've personally listened to. I heard one older gentleman, and I don't pick on old people, but he was an older sounding gentleman, had a new guy, sounded like, probably maybe 20s or 30s. The guy point blank asked him, "Are you a new ham?" And he's like, "Yeah, this is the first time I've actually got on HF. I just got my general and everything." And the guy starts laying into him, "Well, we don't want you here. Get off our frequency, blah, 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 bleep, bleep, here, there, and everything." And it's like the guy was goading him into, "Okay, go ahead and admit you're a new licensee so that I can just rip into you."
There's always bad eggs in anything.
There are. And that by far is not nowhere near close to even 1% of the amateur radio operators that I think.
And
it's
the
just
thing is you
sometimes you hear them more.
You don't want to let that kind of experience turn you off from the hobby altogether. You just almost just kind of have to let it roll off your back and move on.
Just like anything else.
Let's turn the tables just a little bit. So if we are talking about e-com and emergency communications, if we are in the middle of an apocalyptic situation, I think language is going to be used in so many different ways. They're going to be, "I'm scared shitless," you're going to hear people use words and slang because frankly they're probably not licensed, but in the event that that's that way and they're communicating, it's going to be hard to police something like that, especially in emergency situations like that.
We're going to be hard pressed as net control operators to maintain control.
And that's where you use your discretion. Is this someone who's just trying to interfere with the net and cause a problem, or is this someone who maybe they wouldn't have normally said that, it slipped out, and just kind of brush it off?
Well, it could easily be third-party traffic too.
Yeah. It could be, and there are situations. Let's go to Joplin tornado, where tomorrow is the anniversary, 9th anniversary since it happened. That night, there was communications on the 911 repeater that came out of Joplin from Freeman Hospital. And it was an IT tech that did not have his license. I have heard he's since gotten it. This is an emergency on a scale that's hard to even fathom. Okay, the way that town was ripped apart. And he was dialing, he turned the radio on, didn't know what he was doing, identified himself, and was, "I need help." And he's going frequency to frequency until he got somebody back. Well, it happened to be Springfield on a band opening. And I was sitting in the ambulance bay at Cox helping to pass information because they needed doctors, nurses, they needed supplies. They were actually asking for, Caleb took the original call, and they gave him a list of supplies to have shipped immediately out of Kansas City, and he made the phone call for them. And I'm sitting out there, and some guy who didn't identify himself, who was a ham, had the audacity to go, "You're not allowed to talk on the radio without a call sign." And I just said, "This is emergency traffic. Please clear the frequency."
Yeah.
Because in this case, he had every right to use that radio.
Oh yeah.
Well, in some ways, we were just finding out ourselves how bad it was. I just did a little search here. There were 158 people that lost their lives and 1,150 people injured during that. Patty and I had been out on a chase, and we had gone out west to intercept, and it wound up blowing out before it got near us. And we went to a family thing. We just went to a family doings. Well, I don't know. Did you get a phone call or a text?
I did. We went to Terry's, my daughter's sister-in-law. My son-in-law was in from Iraq on R&R, and they were going to be in town. He was going to be here 2 days. My daughter was here for a wedding. That it was actually Caleb. He got married on the 21st.
Yep.
Um, Cicely was the matron of honor in the wedding, and Nathan flew into Springfield. His sister helped him get a ticket out of Dallas to Springfield so he could join her here. And it was our only chance to see him before they headed back to Fort Hood.
Which
So
we did. We got to see him and have ice
briefly. We had ice cream, and we're sitting there finishing our ice cream, staring at this 60-inch plasma screen TV where they're showing footage of what was not Joplin anymore. And we had no clue, because while we were out, the cell towers went down and killed all service from the state line to Fordland. So we had no radar, we had nothing. And happened to be in Nixa, and I got a call, and it was somebody saying, so there's emergency traffic on the repeater, we think you need to hear. Well, that sent all kinds of people into action. Since then, the hospitals have stepped up, and they actually do hospital nets now. They make sure the equipment
that's awesome.
is in working order. But at the time Joplin happened, both of our regional medical centers here had moved their ERs, and the equipment didn't get moved with them. So there was nothing. When we pulled in and asked where the radio room was, they went and looked and said it's empty. And they had no clue. You know, the people that work in the ER weren't responsible for emergency communications of that nature. So a lot has happened, and the amateur community here has really stepped up. But it's practice, and even they do a net to make sure the equipment's working, to make sure it's functioning, because we had severe storms in between times. They only do their nets every quarter, I think.
I think it was kind of fun in that you and I showed up at Cox South, and I walked into ER and I said, so we've got Joplin on the radio outside, and they're like, really? No kidding? Yeah, no kidding.
Freeman Hospital.
Yeah, come with me, and they took me into their emergency planning room, which I guess probably no one had ever seen that, is in ER. And I talked to the big shots, you know, and I'm like, we've got somebody that's on the radio, and we've got a good communication. There are radios in the car, and so we took a doctor out. And we had to explain, push the button when you talk, let go when you're done.
He'd never used a radio before in his life.
It was a she.
It was a he.
There was
a lady there, but it was the guy that talked.
There was a woman that I assisted with that, a doctor. And you just don't know. You know, that I'm going to tell you, that was one of the most critical things that I'd ever witnessed in my whole entire amateur radio career or life. You know, it's just, you know, it was kind of scary, really, because there were lives at stake, and but you know, in all of this, all of these really weird things that's happened to us, had we not joined the club, as bad as it was back then, had we not practiced our craft and had the desire to get on there, even through some of the adverse amateur situations, we just persevered and stayed on it. Look where it is today. Look at the difference. You know, it's. I think
another thing.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I'm going to say another thing too is, Joplin kind of set a precedence for a lot of emergency plans going forward. I mean, when it comes to Aries and races and all the different ones,
Well,
that
and CERT
particular event,
and CERT. Yeah.
yeah, and CERT, absolutely. All those, I mean, that particular event basically set a I guess a cornerstone, groundstone, whatever you want to call it, for emergency communications moving forward. And so now all the hospitals, like Patty said, go through that training process. They go through, the testing and things like that of all their equipment, because any day that could happen to them, and at least they would have a ground rules, or at least procedures in place to know how to effectively communicate.
Right.
So
Yeah, they found out, and I bring up CERT in particular, um, that many people who have the community emergency response team training were not amateur radio operators, and they were called in to do search and rescue. How are they going to communicate from the field when they don't have radios? And I'll give you a prime example, and it was from the Joplin event. They were going through wooded areas where the trees were still standing, looking for things that had blown there, people, possessions, whatever. But at the search and rescue, it was primarily looking for missing people. And one of their team got attacked by a deer. They needed urgent help. This was the broken bones, the whole bit. And there was one person with a radio out there. How do you get that one person with a radio? So now they are encouraging all of their members to get their license, so that when they do search and rescue, they've got communication. Family radio is okay, but if you're covering a wide area, it's not real reliable.
Yeah, and the one thing that kind of irks me about those is sometimes the packaging may be a little bit misleading. It says, cover, 12, 20, 25 miles. They don't put out the power to really do that, particularly like if you're talking about like a heavily wooded area, or say like a city where there's a lot of buildings, where there's a lot of concrete, metal stuff that signal has to go through. That signal is going to go down in strength really quickly, because I think most of the family radios, do they even put out more than about a watt?
I think some of them do too.
2 watts.
GMRS.
Yeah, anywhere from a half watt to 2. It's GMRS, yeah.
GMRS
the
is still a
GMRS
licensed service.
And like the amateur radios are the only ones that I think that I know of off the top of my head that's more than a couple watts.
Right. Family radio doesn't require a license at all. GMRS does, but you just apply for it. You don't have to take a test.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken with GMRS, it's not per individual person. It covers all of your equipment. Now, I believe it renews quicker than an amateur radio license, and I think it's a little bit more expensive, but it's
not
covering,
sure on that.
It's covering all of your equipment that you have that's for GMRS, not just a license for one person. But kind of the flip side of that is the one person, that license covers any equipment that person owns. So
right.
It's kind of a bit of a trade-off if you're wanting to do it like for an individual, or if you're wanting a bunch of equipment maybe to use for a large group of people. Although in some cases, I still kind of think that the individual amateur radio is a little bit of a better deal.
It's $70 for 10 years.
Yeah. Okay, it is 10 years. I was thinking it was only either 5 or 6. I couldn't remember.
Where ours is 15 and it's good for 10.
We don't even
It
have
just
to
takes
pay
more.
anymore.
Well, you
Remember,
have to pay for the
renewals.
initial, but we don't have to pay to renew.
Yeah, renewals no longer require.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so you pay depending on which group you go through for your license testing, you pay either the $13 or the $15, and then you just renew every 10 years without paying anything extra. Where, like with the GMRS, you have to pay the $70 every 10 years to renew.
Right. And they did get out a little further. I think I've got a coworker that got a system so he and his significant other could communicate. And I think it'll go 5 miles.
Well, and
Is
also,
what he
it
said,
is.
and that's with a base unit.
Well, and
At
also,
the house.
if I remember, it's kind of channel-wise similar to CB, and I can't remember if it's all the channels or if it's only certain channels, but at least some of them, you can actually, with the GMRS, you can use a repeater. But I can't remember if it's all the channels or just certain ones.
I don't know enough about it to know.
Yeah, that's safe to me.
And I'm going to step back to CERT just a moment. I've had the training myself, and I have let it lapse. And I've gotten myself involved in a lot of other things. And as much as I love to help with the fair, and I love to go help when they do their phone banks and things, I can't do the search and rescue things anymore. I physically just, they don't want me out in the woods.
Me search and rescuing you.
Yeah. And that does no one any good whenever you have to search and rescue the search and rescuer.
My back's done. Somebody help me out. Yeah. So, but sir, you don't have to help out civically when you take the training, but I highly recommend it for anyone. And I'll tell you why. There's sections in there on what to do for your own preparedness, what to do to search and rescue. What happens if your house collapses and you're out and somebody else is in? How do you safely, appraise the situation to know if you should go in or you should wait for someone else that has the equipment to do so? There's a section in there on the psychology of disaster, knowing what to prepare for yourself, and how others might react should a disaster occur. And there's a section on putting out fires, and that's practical. You learn to use your fire extinguisher. How many of us have them in our kitchen? We've never tested it because we don't want it to run low. But what do you do when you pick it up? And there's a section in there on how to turn the gas off.
Mhm.
You've had storms roll through and suddenly you're smelling gas in your house. What do? What tool do you use? And where do you even look to turn that gas off? Because you don't want to wait for a utility company. They may be socked in with thousands of calls. You want that off so that you don't run the risk of an explosion on top of whatever other disaster you're dealing with. So amateur radio is just a small part of the package to think about if you're trying to get prepared. Here again is why you join a club. Each one of us sitting here tonight has a different take, has different memories of things we've been involved in, and different reasons for being in amateur radio. But we have each other to lean on. If I have an antenna question, and I'm sure Rodney and Franklin would say this too, Steve is the one to go to. Yeah. If we need a big power station to get out for something, we go to Rodney's house.
Well, I'm not exactly got the power, but I mean,
Well, I
know
think
who's that.
Jordan's in that place right now with power.
Yeah.
If we needed a kilowatt, he's the one I know that could reliably provide that. But if you want antennas, I'll get you the antennas.
And my first HF contact, Steve set me up. We went to Marshfield, went to the city park. He put a wire up in a tree. This is a horizontal dipole. Just I think was it a W5? I can't even say it.
No, it was just a regular 40 meter
G5
antenna.
RV.
It was
Just a 40 meters.
Yeah, it was 33 feet, something like that.
Okay. So between two trees, hooked up the radio, checked the SWRs, we're good to go, and I'm talking to the Canary Islands.
Oh, nice. Now, I did. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
It was so quiet that we thought maybe that the antenna just wasn't good. No, it was good. It was just that quiet in the city park in Marshfield.
Now,
We're used to all the noise here.
I didn't make the contact, but my very first event, And really, I guess my first exposure to amateur radio, other than what I had seen, like on TV shows, movies, maybe online, was the last year that the club did the Titanic event. So it would have been April 2012, about around the time that I had just got my technician license. I'd been talking to you, Patty, a little bit on Facebook, and I'd been talking to Richard Marlowe a little bit in Zero MIO. He's so short, we all call him Nomeo. He got a vanity call basically about that, just without the G,
because we called him the gnome.
Yeah. So I kind of shadowed him throughout the event. Although I talked to a few other people, I talked to Jeff, I talked to Steve, I talked to Sean and some other people. And Nomeo, in the middle of the night, well, it may not have quite been the middle of the night. It may have been like around 10, 11 o'clock. He'd been trying to get some satellite contacts all day and had success here and there, but not really, I think, what he was looking for. He makes this contact through a satellite passing over Branson, Missouri, connecting him to a boat floating out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Now, it wasn't the one that they had over the Titanic resting place that I think they either dropped rose petals or a reef or something from, but it was just an individual person who happened to have an amateur radio set on their boat in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So here I'm standing next to this guy with a handheld radio, this exact model, just without this antenna on it, a directional antenna, pointing it up to the sky above Branson, Missouri, talking to a little boat in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. You got like about 5-6 minutes on a good pass to make your contact, say what you're going to say, and wrap it up. Sometimes if the satellite's passing over real low to the horizon, you may only get a minute or two. But that freaking impressed me. A little handheld radio talking to a boat from Branson, Missouri, and the boat's in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I know what they're saying. The new people or people who are thinking, I don't know if I want to get into ham radio. During these events, such as the Joplin tornado and others, there's been others.
Mm.
It was all hands on deck. It was, if we have somebody who's got a license, we need you. These events don't happen often, but they happen. And sometimes your being there is the difference between stuff getting done and stuff not getting done. So
There's a big difference now, though, and it started with Joplin. And yes, all hands on deck. They only allow people in that have had background checks. There was a problem in Joplin. They were allowing people in that were from volunteer fire departments or said that they were.
And we're not.
And they were ransacking. They were pillaging. They were stealing whatever they could get their hands on. So now they want you to be a member of a CERT group. They want you to be a member of an Aries group. Salvation Army has hams on board, and when they're doing their thing, they always have radio ops there.
Isn't Red Cross another accepted
Red
one as
Cross
well?
has hams at their shelters. So yeah, get involved. Not only if you that's where you're headed, get involved with one of those organizations, but get involved with a local club too, because there's where you're going to find your Elmers, like Steve, like Rodney, like Franklin, like myself, that can walk you through the process of being an amateur radio operator and kind of give you a push in the direction you need to go. So that's my...
Well, and not only that, we've been faced with this a little bit recently in that we don't have enough net controls who can cover all the hours. And in that, it's not like we can just say, well, you can be a net control. You got to go through training. You got to have experience. you got to be able to handle it when stuff gets dicey. And when you've got a pileup of hams that all have damage reports, you got to be able to handle that accurately. So it's a build up to process. It's not a start out and do process. And so we need those folks. We need, for those of you listening, we need you to become a part and do the training and learn, sit beside a net control that already knows how to do it, and have them show you the ropes so that you can learn how to do it. It is rewarding, and it's crazy stupid at sometimes, right, Patty?
It can be. It can be that the duress show that came through here, we actually had two repeaters on the same tower, so they both had grand coverage. And it wound up that it took Steve and I tag teaming to take all of the damage reports from the area that were coming in, so that left Jim free to run the net and get the warnings and things out, and the storm reports back in. We had to separate the damage reports out of that, but it took two of us on an alternate repeater to get all that information and then type it in and get it sent. And I know that a number of those I had addresses right and counties wrong. It was kind of an archaic system at the time. But
And
anyway,
lately with the pandemic, we kind of have not really pushed anyone to go out into the field and spot. The Weather Service has said that as well. That they can't be held responsible for anybody going out. So what
they can't be held responsible anyway.
We needed to have people who are at their home that's able to do that without going out. So that means we needed more people that knew that if you step out on your front porch and see something, you know what you're looking at. and this just, as and you add up all these things where if you're gonna do radio for a disaster situation, you need to be all in to do it for that, because when that comes, we don't want you to just be there so that you feel better because you got a hold of your wife across town. We want the two of you involved. Because we need you involved. And
we always acknowledge that, if need be, you need to take care of, your own situation, your family first. But once you have them secured and they're going to be all right, then, hey, come help out.
As many times as I can remember, hams coming to one another's rescue in ice storms and whatever. I mean, it's been a family affair almost. Of we all know who each other is, and we're willing to do something to help. You know what I mean? And that's where the big thing comes in. I try to explain that to all the ones, because I get a fair number of questions. What kind of a radio can I just go buy? Well, you can just go buy any radio, but to have all that other stuff that you're desiring, this is what you got to do. And
I think sometimes people don't realize that's kind of a bit of a loaded question. What antenna and what radio do I buy? It kind of depends on what you're going to use it for.
Yeah. And so
Exactly.
I try to share with them my story, and that is, I have been a part of the club I got licensed through the Southwest Missouri Amateur Radio Club in '83, and no one that was there then is here now, except me. And maybe Don. I think
You were
Don might.
just a young whippersnapper.
Yeah, just a puppy tech that don't know anything, and it's like, well, maybe, but uh, through that whole time, it's always been the same. That it was a group of people with the same interests that were friends, and we took care of each other.
Right.
I find that maybe a little off topic. I find it a little funny. Rodney made the comment the other day that his family comes in. Hey, Dad, is there storms? they know, you know. And I think that right there, you've planted a good seed in your kids because Dad's involved and he knows what's going on. Is Dad scared? No, Dad's not scared. He's involved. So that's kind of what I think. You know, my wish in all this is I'd like to see everybody get involved. Don't just go get a radio because you're afraid of what might happen. Go get a radio because you want to become involved in something bigger than you are and something more fun. And I don't know. Some of my family are not as good as my ham buddy friends. I'll be honest with you.
I want to add to that though. Even if you don't want to be involved in something greater than yourself, you know, you got young kids, or you're working 40 to 60 hours a week, and you don't think you have time. Do it for you. If you're interested and you think that there is a great purpose in having that backup communication, do it for yourself. Get involved with a club and see what possibilities are there. Have people that you can ask questions to. The club that we all belong to, and I don't get to go to anymore, has tech days, and you can sit around and ask all your questions. You can ask anybody at a meeting, but you know, do it for you.
Or I think most of us are pretty accessible by email or text message. You know, we make ourselves available. So you got a question, you know, I was just thinking about this the other day. Do you think this would be something that would be a good option? You know, you can email, Facebook message, whatever, and you know, yeah, that sounds like that'd be a good thing to try. Or, well, you know, that might work out, but you know, if you tried this, this might be just a little bit better for what you wanted, you know, do than that option.
Right.
We try to make ourselves available.
So, for people that might be watching, if you had questions, you could email junglechasers@gmail.com, or you could go to www.smarc.org and go to contact us, and you will get a response back pretty quickly from the email that goes to. So great place to direct questions.
Between those two, you will talk to one of us. In other words, if you're listening and you want to talk to one of us and you want to ask us directly, we have that ability. I mean, that's what those emails. There's probably more than that. Although there's not a Greene County Skywarn Facebook page or a Jungle Chasers Facebook page yet.
Yeah, there is a page for spotters, but not a public page for Greene County yet.
Now we have a public page for the region.
Yeah, for Southwest
Missouri. Skywarn has got a page, and we do have messages open there to the public as well. So if you're interested in the Skywarn side, even if you're from Greene County, get a hold of me, and I'll hook you up with Franklin for Greene County, or I'll answer your questions directly or direct you to someone in your county. So we're always glad to do that. I have a sad thing to report. I just got a message. One of our ham family, I know Steve knows her, at least through Facebook. Samantha Henley, K-E-0-L-M-Y, out of Benton County. She's a volunteer firefighter. She's the Aries director up there. She was an assistant OEM. I think she's dropped that.
Mhm.
Her father died today,
Oh, I hate to hear that.
and her husband is fighting cancer. Just finished radiation treatment. So um, they've got a lot on their plates, and they give a lot to the community. So I'm asking for some prayers. They definitely are in need.
Definitely. That's a hard thing, just to either lose a parent or to have a spouse, a parent, a sibling, family member, even a friend that you care about struggling with cancer, but to have both at the same time. Yeah, definitely
Well,
thoughts and prayers.
I will add though, in for Samantha's behalf, it's not all dour and doom and gloom for them, because I know that she is a pretty bubbly personality, and in that fight of cancer with Bigfoot, that's the husband. he they've posted some pretty funny stuff. So the good part about that is they're keeping their spirits high, which
Oh yeah,
in
that
any
helps a
kind of
lot.
thing like that, that's good, because it'll help you heal faster if you're I don't know. Sometimes Patty and I are real bad about making light of a bad situation amongst ourselves, but that's how we cope. That's our we use humor sometimes when for the
Dark
pandemic.
humor sometimes.
Yeah.
It helps you not to get so upset, so depressed about it. It keeps your spirits high, and I really a lot of times think not getting so bogged down in the depressiveness of it, the sadness of it. Helps you keep your hopes going and helps you keep your energy going to get through it. Whereas if you just resign to it's depressive, it's sad, there's no hope, then you kind of give up.
Yeah, I think around this house we were too busy to notice there was a pandemic.
I have something to share
Yes.
There we
in
go.
that light. Okay, it's an acronym that's easy to remember called LAUGH.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, limit exposure to negativity, turn off the social media, block negative people, don't listen to the news. So get your news from trusted sources like your local health department. Excellent source there for knowing what's going on and what's going to happen. Anchor yourself. In other words, stay in a routine. Develop some kind of ritual or routine for structure in your days. Steve and I pretty well have that since I'm still working. And one of those essential bodies. Unite, like we're doing right now. The four of us are united. Don't let physical distance lead to social and emotional isolation. Be gentle with yourself and others, and mind your health. Eat well, get physical exercise, um, and use social media in a way to contact people. Don't just go on and look at all the non-news or whatever Facebook's trying to block today, um, or the panic that other people have. Reach out to your family, text message, FaceTime. FaceTime's important. Um, Grandparents separated from their grandchildren and children. You have parents separated from their kids. We still have military that are deployed, and the extra worry of that, in addition to trying to deal with day to day. Take advantage of that FaceTime. So it's limit exposure to negativity, anchor, unite, be gentle, and mind your health.
Cool.
We did that somehow. I was just too busy to notice there was a pandemic going.
So Here's Samantha's an amazing lady.
Mhm.
She is the public information officer at the Warsaw Fire Protection District, certified trainer at Benton County, Missouri Community Emergency Response Team, the president of the Dark Radio Club, DAM, Amateur Radio Club, because they're up there by Truman Dam.
Oh,
The
okay.
deputy director at Benton County, Missouri Emergency Management, and the emergency coordinator at Benton County, Missouri Aries.
And she's a
So
mom.
she is. So
She got
she is
2
just
kids.
steeped in the emergency management and communications communities up there.
Yes. And she's a member of LAS, which is Lakes Area Storm Spotters.
Nice.
So, an amazing lady. She has truly dived in both feet to.
Well, and she's a ham too because she was net control for the Indianapolis 500 amateur radio net that was run in Indianapolis. She did it from remote.
Yeah,
So she
and they had a
she's
good time.
yeah, she's all in on amateur radio too, which I think is pretty cool.
And her kids are too. Her whole family are hams. The kids all have their license, as does her husband. So,
Now there's one problem with her. I met her kids at Nixa at the Hamfest, but I couldn't meet her because she wouldn't hold still long enough for me to say hi. And I just didn't have the wheels under me to chase her.
She's kind of like a bee. She's going from this flower to that flower to that
Yeah.
flower to that one.
I mean, I hooked up with a lot of people at the Nixa Hamfest, and it was great. But they were all the slow-moving ones like Sap and Al and a few of the others that I could catch.
Rodney, you've been awfully quiet tonight.
I think Ronnie's going to go to sleep.
No, I'm here. I'm here. It's been good conversation. You know, sometimes you just got to sit back and listen. And you know, I think I shared some of my thoughts on things, but overall, there's it. I mean, this topic when it comes to e-communications, and just if you want to consider this as kind of like a finality to what we're talking about, you can have a lot of conversations about it, and the more you do, the more you know you can keep it in your mind, and when something like that happens. So I'm going to say this is probably not the last time that you'll be hearing us talking about that, because in the type of thing we do, especially as jungle chasers, e-communications is very important because, again, tornadoes is the biggest thing. And if we go into search and rescue mode, we're already in that. We're already in that process. And so we've got to learn how to mobilize ourselves and understand that, you know, and it's all a matter of when you're not necessarily chasing, even though that is something that some of us do. But when you're in the spotting aspect of it, that's where communications becomes, you know, paramount, whether it be to a net control who's handling Skywarn, whether it be a base station that's been set up for emergency communications to the OEM. So, I mean, as far as that's concerned, the more we talk about it, the more we're going to keep it on our mind, and the more we're going to be ready when something like that happens.
Yeah.
So, Rodney,
and that's why practice is important.
the chasing thing, let me just tell you how our recent chasing went, because we went right out. What was it, a enhanced or a slight risk? We were right at the edge of it, and the clouds were 500 feet high, and it was nothing but rain. We didn't get to see nothing.
All the way there. We took our cameras, and they never came out of the bags. So, yeah, it was supposed to be intermittent showers all day, and I looked at the radar before we took off from the house. We broke our quarantine and went to Independence, Kansas, and back. Little day trip we limited our exposures along the way, but yeah, I looked at the radar and went, I don't think that's intermittent. That is a wall of water. It covered half the state of Kansas.
Who was the meteorologist that we were giving such a hard time to during the day?
Doug Hetty.
And if I'm not mistaken, is he out of the Joplin market, or is
Channel
he a little
7.
further
Yeah, he's
north?
out of the Joplin
Joplin.
market.
Channel 7 Pittsburgh and Joplin. So he said that we would have intermittent sunshine. And I was rooting for him. I said, man, 1 square inch of sunshine and this guy's got it. It didn't happen. Nope. It did when we came home. It just cleared. You could see the clouds just following us.
Oh yeah. We stopped and bought some groceries at our favorite grocery store that we don't have here anymore. And so we were maybe bad that way, but so I'm going to share my screen again. You guys, you realize we've had this horrible flooding and just rain that just won't stop. And so what you may not have seen are things like this.
Mm-hmm.
And this was when it wasn't raining.
Wow.
Yeah, you
Now
could tell
this-
it was kind of cleared up a little bit.
So this guy actually got his crops in. It looks like a rice field.
But it's corn.
But it's corn. They're putting up wind
The wind turbine.
generating. Evidently, they're raising canola out that way too. So that did get in the ground between the rain. But it was those fields, and it was just field after field after field that was like this. Just everywhere you looked. And it was that way last year. They haven't had a break.
You know, yesterday we went out and we got some flowers. We took some to my grandparents' grave and my dad's grave, and an aunt and her son who passed away in his mid to late 30s. Another uncle of mine, and then we got some flowers to take out to my both of my mom's grandparents, my grandmother and grandfather's parents on her side, and my grandmother has a little brother who was stillborn, and so we got a little flower to put on his grave. And so we took the ones out at Green Lawn yesterday. We took the ones at Marshfield today. I don't really remember the ground being soggy at Green Lawn. It was soft, so you could push everything down real good and deep, so it shouldn't blow away. But there was one section at Marshfield when we were trying to find, because we always have trouble finding both of her grandparents. You know, as many times as we've been out there, you would think we'd remember where they're at, but we usually only go out there at Memorial Day, so we kind of forget where it's at. And we were looking around, and it was like the further, I'm not really for sure what direction that would be. I guess it would be to the north or east, but it was a little bit downhill, but not a really big hill. But the further I went, it's like the ground got soggier and soggier and soggier, to the point that when I was taking steps, I could hear the smushiness of it. Yeah. And I was like, I'm going back the other direction, because I'm going to start leaving footprints. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of getting that mushy. So I figured that's just from all the rain we've had recently.
Have you seen those movies with the quicksand, Franklin?
I've seen movies with quicksand. I don't know if they're the same ones you're talking about.
I'm thinking that now the Kansas rain, it was actually Nebraska that got hit last year the worst, but yeah, they did actually have a break to get their crops in, and but you know, if it all holds, those guys have trouble with water anyway. If it all holds, they'll do okay for the year as far as farming goes. But I'm looking at the national radar in Kansas is the one with the rain, and a little bit offshore in Florida, and some cells building
A
in
little
Texas.
bit down in Texas. Yeah.
Oh.
Yep.
Anyway, I don't know if we've got any more to chase on that topic. I think we've covered it pretty well.
I do have just a couple pictures that I had prepared
All right.
about kind of power options. If we want to go ahead and talk about those for just a second, it shouldn't take very long.
Sure.
Okay, I'll go ahead and share my screen over here.
This topic could be a series that would
Oh,
go
yeah.
all summer.
Yeah, I'm definitely not going to go very extensive into it, but just kind of how do you power your radios, particularly with kind of a slant on emergency communications, but any of this could apply anytime. Because again, another thing besides thinking, oh, one antenna could cover everything, I thought, well, you just buy the radio and plug it in to the wall outlet. Well, you don't. Some radios, like my hybrid radio, you can do that. It was made for that, but most radios, particularly more modern radios, are all designed to run off of DC power. So you usually have a battery, or you have something like this, which is a power supply, and this actually happens to be the exact model I have. You've got what's called a 5-way binding post here. Now I know they've got the holes in here where you can wire up like a banana clip that just plugs into each of those holes. These plastic covers, they unscrew a little bit, and you can there's a metal post inside there. You can wrap a cable around it. I think there's even holes through it where you might be able to just, strip the insulation off of the wiring, kind of twist it really good and maybe stick it through a little bit, tighten these plastic rings down to make sure that it doesn't come out. And I specifically bought this specific power supply because you see this P at the end of the model number. That means it has Anderson power poles on it. Now you can't see it in this photo, and before the live stream started, I couldn't find one that had a shot of the back. But there is actually on the back side, and I think it's in this corner, there's actually 2 sets of Anderson power poles, and that's how I've got both of my radios set next to me. Plugged into it is I've got Anderson connectors on my power cable for my 2730 and my 746 Pro. So once you get this plugged into the wall and you get a connection coming from it, how can you power something? Well, you can power it directly to the radio with a power cable, or if you've got several radios or several accessories that you want to power off of, you might get something like this. This is called a rig runner. They're made by Western Mountain Radio, but there's a couple other different companies that make similar devices. And this particular one has got already your connectors for your Anderson power poles, and each one of them is fused. Now, this particular one's got 4. There's actually 5. You've got one that goes in, and then you've got 4 outputs. This one's also got a couple USB connectors, also, like if you want to power something that runs off of a USB cable.
We need one of those for the car, dear.
Oh yeah.
Yes, we do.
Hey, I would love to have one even.
Only we need about 4 of the USB connectors on it.
Yeah. Now they do have various different sizes. This is just one that I could find a fairly clear picture of. I think I've seen up to either 8 or 12. And then some of them will have, maybe 4 Anderson connectors, maybe a couple USB. And I think I've seen some that have 3-prong regular plugins. There's various different options and configurations that you can get. And then that you can use to distribute your power out. But now, what if you want something for backup in case the commercial power goes out, or you don't want to use a power supply? Well, what you do is you get a battery. You don't get a radio, you already have a radio. You get a battery to power that radio. Now, this particular one is a sealed lead acid battery, but it's sealed. It's not unsealed. And it happens to be a gel type, which you kind of get a little bit more oomph out of the the gel types or like a deep cycle battery than you do a regular battery. So let me go back to this sealed part about this. Most lead acid batteries, like you would use for like a battery for a car, they're not sealed, so they will produce gas inside of them, and that gas vents off. Well, if you have this in an enclosed area, say in your room in your house or in your shack, wherever you have your radio set up, this can build up and this can be harmful, not only to you. If it builds up enough, it could possibly cause an explosion. So what you want to make sure to do is, if you're getting a lead acid battery, you want to make sure it's one of the sealed ones. They won't vent off the gas, and you can safely have them inside. If it's not a sealed one, you can still use them, but you don't want to use them inside. You want to make sure they're outside and you have some wiring or some way to get the connection from the battery into your radio without the battery being inside. And I don't think the sealed ones are that much more expensive, so it would probably just be a little bit better to go ahead and get a sealed battery.
A universal power supply also. The way I'm set up here with Skywarn, my computer will go. I haven't run it without power to test it with this new radar, but I have 3 to 7 hours of life in my computer. My radio does too with the universal power supply.
Nice.
Which is long enough to get a generator up and running and power critical things.
Yeah,
right.
And that is definitely something else that you can do now. I had one that I had all my computer equipment plugged into, and that was kind of before I had my mobile radio, and I just had the HT. But yeah, definitely, it was a pretty beefy one from Best Buy from Geek Squad, and I think I had the computer, my extra monitor, I think I had a printer, and I had something else. It had 8 outputs on it. 4 were just surge protection only, and 4 were battery backed up. And that would run my computer for 30, almost 40 minutes.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, I think I paid in 2012, I'm wanting to think I paid like $250 for it. So it had pretty beefy batteries in it, and it lasted a good 6 or 7 years before the batteries just finally failed in it. Now, if you want a battery that will give you a little bit more oomph than even like a gelled or a deep cycle battery, they have these new batteries from a place called BioNO. What they are is they are a lithium iron phosphate battery. I have heard they are phenomenal. They get a lot of juice in a smaller size battery. The only 2 downsides that I have heard about them, if I am not mistaken, I believe they are a bit heavier than an equivalent sized battery of, say, like a sealed lead or a deep cycle or a gel type battery, and they are expensive. A equivalent size for one of the other batteries, I think I've heard 3, maybe even sometimes 4 times the cost. I threw this in here to let people know that this is a new technology that's out there. It works pretty good with like solar chargers and other things, and it's going to probably give you the most bang for your buck, but you're going to have a lot of buck out for that bang. Then another way that you can use to charge these, whether you use, like a regular charger, a battery tender or something like that, you can also use solar panels, and you're probably going to say, well, how do I get this to charge that battery? And I've got one other option to show you here in just a moment. But you can usually get charger controllers that will take an input from a solar charger that will charge up your battery, or you can just have it plugged in to a charger from your AC power that will charge up your battery.
And you want to make sure you have something connected between that and the battery to charge it.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
will,
you can't just
that
connect
will
this directly.
monitor your battery power because you don't want to get too much and overcharge your
Yeah,
battery,
yeah,
which can
yeah.
happen.
And that will do bad things to your battery. That will lower its life. And usually, like I said, particularly with a solar panel, you're going to want some kind of a charge controller anyway, because you can't hook this directly up to the battery. Really, those usually monitor, and they have like an overcharge protection and stuff. And even if you're just getting like a battery charger to charge up a battery, don't get a dumb charger. Get some kind of a smart charger, like a battery tender or something that will either trickle charge it once it gets up to a certain charge, or will kind of, sense that it's charged as much as it can, and it'll go ahead and shut off. Because, you definitely, thank you, Patty, for pointing that out. You don't want to overcharge your battery. Now, here's a pretty neat option that I saw. They're a little bit expensive. I'm wanting to think they're close to like a couple $100. You can probably build the exact same thing for much cheaper, but I just wanted to throw this out here. Also made by West Mountain Radio is a power gate, and this is actually the Epic power gate. So what this does is you have, whether it's coming directly from your power supply or a battery, or coming from whatever source, maybe from a rig runner or something, you've got your power coming into here. It will go out this output, which you can have connected to a battery if this isn't coming from a battery. Here's your output that goes to your radio, and then there's also an input from a solar panel, and I believe this one you actually don't have to have a separate charge controller. It's all built into the power gate, so you just have to have a cable going from your solar panel that will have Anderson power poles on one end and connect in here. So what this thing does is your power goes out. You've got this connected to a power supply that's coming from AC power. Your power goes out. You got a battery connected to here. It will instantly switch over to this battery and start drawing power from the battery through here out to your radio. If you have a solar panel connected, it will start drawing power off of the solar panel coming out to your battery. And if there's enough left over, it will charge your battery here if you have it connected. Now, like I said, I believe these are around close to $200. You can probably build this for less than that, but it's a pretty neat idea where you can have your AC power, you can have battery backup, you can also have solar power coming to it, and the second this power cuts off, one of these two other backup sources is going to automatically start, and you're still got your radio equipment and stuff on the air.
That's nice.
So that's kind of about what I've got right now for power options for emergency communications. As you said, I'm sure we can probably do a big, huge discussion and multi discussions and stuff for that in the future. But I just thought I'd go ahead and quickly throw that out there with a few pictures.
So that's awesome, Franklin. I want to add that battery that you showed from Bioenno.
Yes.
Its price on the one shown was $359.
That sounds like maybe they might have came down a little bit in price, because I was thinking at one time the cheapest one they had was closer to $400, but they may have came down a little bit in price.
Yeah, it's
to put it in
40 amp hour battery.
Yeah.
And what's the expected life of that battery?
Well, you can draw an amp off from it for 40 hours.
No, I mean the expected life in years.
Or how many charges?
10 years is what they're saying with lithium iron phosphate.
Iron phosphate.
So to put it in perspective, I have a sealed battery in my car because it goes under my back seat.
Mm-hmm.
I just recently had to replace it, or chose to replace it before my battery actually gave out. I had gotten 7 years out of the one prior, but I paid $157 for a battery that'll last anywhere from 3 to 5 years.
And that's a pretty good price for an automotive battery, really.
Right. So, and fair market value. So you're getting, you have the potential of 10 years use out of this battery for 300 and something, as opposed to a sealed battery, or you talk deep cycle, they're even more than my car battery.
Yeah,
Uh, so it's something to think about
definitely.
in putting that all into perspective. So
The big standby batteries, the 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphates, run anywhere from $500 to $750. Now these are the well, 550 will get you a multi-cell where you actually put it together in pieces. It's designed for like uh, golf carts. They use them on golf carts. They're that kind of size. So
Gotcha.
um, they're really something. Now the big dog 200 amp hour. And this is not Bioenno. This is just any name brand. Uh, uh, that's me. It's 200 amp hour. That's another one of those big batteries for golf carts. It's $1,500.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we gotta say the disclaimer. That power supply in the beginning was MFJ, but there are others out there. That's
Oh
not the
yeah,
only
there's a
brand name
lot
out
of
there.
different brands. Yeah,
So
and none of the brands really did I pick specifically, other than the MFJ one, just because that's the same model I have and I'm
yep.
familiar with it. You can get power supplies, those power control panels or routing panels, batteries, from loads of different companies that make them.
Yeah, they make a charge controller,
Mhm.
and these are kind of designed for that solar application,
Mhm.
where you set up a solar panel and a battery, and it. I mean, you can go anywhere from 15 to $300 on charge controllers. But what that does is it will maximize the power input to your solar cells and prevent
Mm.
overcharging.
Yeah.
And again, there's no. You can go to Lowe's. You can go to Lowe's and buy a Renology Wanderer 30, which is a 30 amp charge controller for $30. um, that's not terrible. That's not a bad price. It'll even measure the temperature of your batteries and back off the charge
Yeah.
rate if the batteries are hot.
Are getting
Um,
too hot. That's nice.
so you know what? You're just proving that we're a bunch of geeks, and when it comes to this kind of stuff, we can talk about it.
Oh yeah.
A
Just
long
just
time.
Yes.
kind of a thing in general that my grandfather and my dad used to apply, and the family in general has done it too, and it's usually always worked out for us pretty well. Don't buy the most expensive item, but don't buy the cheapest either. Kind of get something good, kind of part way in the middle, that's got good reviews, got a good reputation, and usually most of the time that will serve you pretty darn well.
That's not bad advice.
Yeah.
Having been the recipient of hand-me-down junk in the Ozarks for more than 30 years.
Hey, used stuff is not bad as long as it's in good shape and it's been taken care of. I'm not afraid to use anything used.
Yeah, I know it, but the thing of it is that it seems like every time I get something that is a hand-me-down from somebody here, they always have bought the cheapest thing with the least number of options.
Ah, yeah.
and
I see
this
that
coming
too.
from the man that will pay $1 for something on the chance it might work, rather than paying 20 for a guaranteed to work for 2 to 3 years.
Done that too.
So
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Are you
Really?
guys waiting for the sound effect? I can
Yeah.
get it.
yes,
Do it. Yeah.
I'm telling you, Rodney, before we go live, you need to have these sound effects ready.
Oh no, it's ready.
He pretty much needs a finger on the button, just waiting to press it the whole
I played
time.
it a couple of times tonight. Did you all hear it or no?
I don't guess I
Yeah,
did.
I
Oh
don't think
man,
I
I
did.
tested it
I,
too.
I don't have my volume up real loud either, so.
No, I would have heard it. It didn't.
You didn't hear it.
No. Eh.
Okay. Wah 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 wah. I can do my own sound effects there.
As they said on the Flintstones, it's a living.
Yeah. That sounds like Barney Rubble.
So, on that, are we closing?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've done we've covered all of our things, and I have a feeling that tomorrow sometime we'll probably be live on Jungle Chasers again with actual net control stuff.
So
And,
yeah, it really. Before we go, I guess I need to get on here and do a little official business. Huh?
Okay.
So the hazardous weather outlook as of 8:25 p.m. This hazardous weather outlook is for portions of the Missouri Ozarks and extreme southeast Kansas. Day 1 tonight, weather hazards expected, elevated lightning risk. Scattered thunderstorms will be possible tonight over western Missouri and southeast Kansas. A decaying line of thunderstorms may also be approaching from the west by early Friday morning. Days 2 through 7, Friday through Wednesday, some strong to severe storms will be possible Friday afternoon and evening, with all modes of severe weather possible over western Missouri and southeast Kansas. Large hail and damaging wind would be the most likely severe weather elements. However, we cannot rule out a low-end tornado threat. There will be at least a chance of thunderstorms on nearly a daily basis from the weekend into the first half of next week. Heavy rain and flooding will also be possible as the ground remains fairly saturated from the heavy rainfall last week. So, honey, that means the lawn needs to get mowed tomorrow morning.
I was thinking about over the weekend. I wasn't that worried about it.
You know, Steve, this could be your opportunity. You could tell her, but honey, if you would buy me a riding lawnmower with headlights on it, I could do
one.
it tonight.
Yeah, no, I'm
He
not going to
has
mow it
one.
tonight either. Oh,
We
you know what I need to
also,
do? I need to get the
with the
feeders.
neighbors in mind, we also have an old-fashioned push mower. The man needs exercise. I have been out at midnight in the past pushing that thing around. There's no engine. It's human power.
It's already too deep for that.
Oh, now you're
In
telling
here
on
or in the
yourself.
lawn?
No, I don't think I quite
Oh,
caught that,
we're not
Rodney.
good for that one.
I'm gonna have to get my waders.
Okay.
Well,
So we probably need to stay on a little bit after we close out live and talk about our next agenda. But since we haven't really done that a bit, anyway, who wants to kick off the 73 round?
ow.
Well,
I guess
last
so.
time we checked, it was in succession. So Patty,
okay.
Franklin, myself, and then Steve closes this
Okay.
out.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. We hope you've learned something. Again, if you have questions, you can shoot those at junglechasers@gmail.com or go to www.smarc.org and click contact us and put your questions there. That will get you to one of us, okay? This is Patty, KD0AEL, wishing you 73.
And I just want to say I appreciate anyone who was watching tonight. We hope that we brought you some content of value and something that you found interesting. And we'll do it again probably tomorrow and then again next Thursday probably. So 73s, and hope that everyone has a great rest of their evening, week, and a Memorial Day weekend.
Thank you, Franklin. And my name is Rodney. I just want to thank y'all for joining us. This is a fun time for all. Hopefully, you find humor in our little quips here and there. Hopefully, you uh, are entertained in some shape or form. But that's one reason why we do this, to spend time together. But then you can just kind of have a little window of what we do, uh, you know, on a weekly basis. So I want to say 7-3. We'll see you guys probably sometime tomorrow evening, or if there any severe weather comes up, know that we'll be on top of it. 7-3 from K0FZ.
And Rodney, thanks for that, and I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. If you found our content interesting, like and subscribe, and that helps us a bunch. We hope that we can keep this up and do. I think maybe more of the same kind of stuff when we're not doing our storm coverage, and kind of keep this being a place to go for good information about what's going on here in the Ozarks and beyond in amateur radio. So and the weather. So this is KA0SPM. I want to say good night and 73 to everyone.
Break before you hit the switch.
Oh my, that was close.
Dun, 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 dun.
Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. So before we go, Franklin reminded me it is Memorial Weekend, and heartfelt thanks to those who gave all for this country, for the freedoms that we have and continue to have along the way, and to their families who also gave that ultimate sacrifice. And one more, because of the COVID virus, to all those essential workers out there that are, especially the nurses, doctors, EMTs, firefighters, police, and others like myself that kind of work on the sidelines. I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I think from all of us for all that you do for us.
Definitely.
73.
Yeah, may you have a flyover every day. 73, everybody.
Have a good evening. Bye.